She replaced her sister at the altar, not knowing the humble millionaire held a dark bargain. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The church smelled faintly of roses and candle wax, but to her it was suffocating. Clara's heart thundered beneath the lace bodice of a gown that was never meant for her. The dress had been altered at the last minute, pulled tight around her shoulders, stitched with threads of desperation. Her sister should have been the one walking down this aisle, smiling under the chandeliers. But last night, a single letter and a trembling plea had changed everything. Clara, I cannot do it. If you do not take my place, the debt will destroy us. Please, you are the only one who can save the family. The words still burned in her chest. She could have refused, should have refused, but one look at her mother's tired face, one glance at the eviction notice on the kitchen counter, and Clara had known she had no choice. The doors creaked open, every head turned. The hush inside the grand hall pressed against her skin as she took one step, then another, toward the man waiting at the altar. He was the figure whispered about in gossip columns, the so-called humble millionaire, who claimed to live simply despite his vast fortune. Tall, sharply tailored, his dark eyes glinted beneath the vaulted ceiling. To the crowd he looked serene, but up close Clara caught the flicker of calculation in his gaze, as if he was studying not a bride, but a business deal. Her palms sweated against the bouquet. Each step forward echoed like the toll of a bell. What had she agreed to? What exactly was the price of replacing her sister? When she reached him, he did not smile. Instead, he leaned in just enough for her to hear his low whisper. Remember the agreement. This marriage is a contract. Nothing more. Clara's throat tightened. She nodded faintly, forcing her lips into something that resembled a smile for the audience. The priest's voice rolled over the crowd, solemn and steady, yet Clara barely heard the words. In that moment, standing beside the man everyone admired as humble, she sensed the truth. This was not humility at all. This was a mask, and behind the mask was something darker, something dangerous. Her sister's absence was only the beginning. The ceremony continued, but Clara's mind swirled. The weight of the vows, the pressure of his presence, the silent bargain that now bound her life to his, it all pressed like iron chains. She could not know then that this step down the aisle was not the start of salvation, but the beginning of a game she had never agreed to play. And in this game, the so-called humble millionaire held all the cards. The ceremony ended with applause that echoed in Clara's ears like a cruel reminder. The crowd believed they had witnessed a union of love, but only she knew the truth. The vows she had spoken were not hers. They belonged to her sister, who had vanished on the night before the wedding. Hours later, when the guests had gone and the gown was folded away, Clara sat at the edge of her bed in the guest chamber of his mansion. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. She replayed the letter her sister had left, the hurried handwriting trembling across the page. If you do not do this, everything will collapse. Mother's hospital bills, the mortgage, the loan sharks, there will be nothing left. I cannot face him. Please, Clara, you are stronger than me. Clara pressed the paper to her chest until it crumpled. She wanted to scream. She wanted to curse her sister for running away. But deep down she knew the truth. Her sister had been desperate, just as she was now. The debts had grown like vines around their family, squeezing tighter with every month. She remembered the hospital room where her mother lay, recovering from another round of treatments. The machines had beeped in steady rhythm, each one translating into another bill. Clara had sat beside her mother's bed, promising that somehow she would keep them safe. The doctors had spoken in careful voices, warning that without continued care, her mother's future was uncertain. Then there was the house, their childhood home, a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The bank's notices had piled on the kitchen table, red letters spelling foreclosure. Clara had once dreamed of saving enough to restore it, to keep their father's memory alive in those walls. Now it stood as another threat, another thing slipping from her grasp. And beyond that, the debts her father had left behind when he passed. Promises of repayment turned to threats. The men who had visited the door at night, their voices low but sharp, reminding her that time was running out. Clara knew why her sister had begged her to take her place. The marriage was not about love, it was about survival. The man at the altar, the so-called humble millionaire, held the key to ending their ruin. But at what cost? She rose from the bed and wandered toward the tall windows overlooking the city. Lights sparkled across the skyline, each one a life moving forward, free and untouched by the chains that bound her. Her reflection stared back, pale and weary beneath the weight of a wedding ring that was never meant for her. The door creaked behind her. He stepped into the room, his presence filling the space with quiet authority. Dressed now in a dark suit, he looked less like a groom and more like the figure she had feared. Calculated, composed, unreadable. "You are thinking of leaving," he said, his voice even, as if reading her mind. Clara turned quickly, clutching the ring with trembling fingers. "I am thinking of what I gave up," she admitted. "Of what I had to sacrifice." He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "Your sister was not ready, but you—" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You have a strength she did not. Perhaps that is why this will work." "This?" she repeated, the word sharp on her tongue. "You mean this contract you call a marriage?" His jaw tightened. "Call it what you want, but know this, Clara. Without me, your debts would bury you. Your mother would lose her care. Your home would vanish. You would have nothing. With me, you have protection, a future, even if it is not the one you dreamed of." Her chest rose and fell with each breath, anger and despair twisting inside her. He was right. That was the cruelest part of all. She had no power to deny it. The bills, the threats, the hospital, they had cornered her into this bargain. She faced him fully, her eyes blazing even through the fear. "You may hold the power now, but do not mistake me for someone who will bow forever. I agreed to this marriage for my family, not for you." For the first time, his lips curved into something like a smile, cold, unreadable. "We will see, Clara. We will see." As the door closed behind him, Clara sank back against the wall, her heart pounding. The world believed she had won security, that marrying a millionaire was a dream fulfilled. But only she knew the truth. This was not freedom. It was a cage made of wealth, and she had just locked herself inside. The following morning, Clara woke to the sound of footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, throwing cold patterns of gold across the polished floor. She had slept little, her mind chasing endless questions. What exactly had she promised away when she stepped into her sister's place? The answer waited for her in the study. The room was vast, lined with shelves of leather-bound books that smelled faintly of dust and ink. At the center stood a desk of dark oak, and behind it he sat in perfect composure. The humble millionaire, her husband in name only. His suit was immaculate, his tie pinned with quiet precision. In his hand he held a folder. "Sit," he said simply. Clara obeyed, her back stiff as she lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her palms sweated against her dress as he slid the folder across the desk. The sound of paper against wood seemed louder than it should have. "This," he said, "is our contract." She stared down at the document, her breath catching when she saw the first lines typed neatly across the page. "Terms of arrangement." Her throat tightened. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. "I am always serious," he replied, his tone flat. "Read it." Her eyes scanned the rules. 1. They would appear together at no fewer than 5 public events, galas, charity dinners, shareholder meetings. 2. They would share the same home but lead separate private lives. 3. No intimacy beyond what appearances required. Number 4. No interference in his business affairs. 5. And finally, no questions about his past. The last line struck her hardest. It was bold, almost daring her to disobey. She looked up, her voice unsteady but sharp. "Why this? Why such rules?" His gaze was steady, unflinching. "Because clarity prevents disappointment. You are here to play a role, Nothing more. In return, your debts vanish, your mother receives her care, and your family home remains yours. That was the bargain. But if you break these terms, everything you love will crumble. Clara's stomach turned. And what about love? What about truth? His lips pressed into a thin line. Do not confuse this with love, Clara. Love is fragile. Contracts endure. The words chilled her. She had once believed marriage was sacred, a vow of heart and soul. Now it was ink on paper, a transaction. She traced the edges of the contract with trembling fingers, each rule cutting away at what little freedom she had left. You expect me to sign this, she said quietly. I expect you to understand it, he corrected. Sign if you wish to keep what you hold dear. Refuse, and you will watch it all disappear. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She thought of her mother's fragile body in that hospital bed, the house on the verge of foreclosure, the debts clawing at their door. The choice was no choice at all. She picked up the pen. For a moment her hand hovered above the paper, her heart rebelling, begging her not to surrender. Then, with a single stroke, she signed her name. The silence after was unbearable. He leaned back in his chair, studying her not with warmth but with calculation, as though she were an asset secured, a chess piece placed where he wanted it. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. Clara's voice cracked as she forced the words out. You may think you own me now, but I will not let this contract define me. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Amusement? Admiration? It vanished too quickly to tell. He gathered the folder, slid it into a drawer, and locked it with a key that gleamed in the morning light. This is the beginning, Clara, he said softly. Do not forget it was you who agreed to play this game. As he rose and left the room, the heavy door closing behind him, Clara sat frozen. The ink of her signature was still drying on the paper. A contract bound her now, a cage written in words, and yet deep inside, a spark burned. If this was a game, she swore she would not lose. The contract had been signed, but Clara quickly discovered that ink on paper was only the beginning. Within days, her life shifted from quiet struggle to a world of relentless expectations. The mansion became her stage. Every morning she was ushered into a routine designed not for her comfort but for her transformation. Tailors arrived with racks of gowns, fabrics shimmering under the light like liquid jewels. A stylist circled her with sharp eyes and sharper words, tugging at her hair, adjusting her makeup, criticizing her posture. Smile less, the woman instructed. Grace is restraint. Do not look like a girl from the countryside. Look like you belong. Clara clenched her teeth, enduring the tug of pins against her scalp. She had once been free to tie her hair back with a ribbon, to slip into worn shoes and hurry to work. Now even her laughter was corrected, reshaped to suit an image she had never chosen. The first test came at a gala. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and silver trays carried by silent servers. Clara's gown, midnight silk, trailed behind her as she entered on his arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some admiring, some suspicious. She felt every eye dissecting her, measuring her worth, searching for cracks. Her husband leaned close, his words a low warning. Remember the rules. Stand tall, smile when spoken to, and above all, do not falter. Her palms trembled against the clutch she carried, but she nodded. At first, she stumbled. When a reporter thrust a microphone at her and asked about their marriage, she froze. Her mind blanked. The weight of the contract pressed down, suffocating her. Then she remembered her mother's face, pale under hospital lights, and forced herself to speak. We met, unexpectedly, she said, her voice shaky but growing steadier. And sometimes the best stories are the ones we never plan. A murmur of approval swept through the crowd. She saw his jaw tighten, then relax, as though he had not expected her to survive the moment. Later, at a dinner table lined with crystal glasses, she used the wrong fork and caught the smirk of a woman across from her. Clara flushed, fumbling, but corrected herself with quiet determination. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fail. The nights blurred together. Charity events, board meetings, luncheons in glass towers high above the city. Clara learned to navigate conversations she barely understood, smiling when investors boasted, listening when wives whispered gossip. She made mistakes, yes, spilled wine on silk, mispronounced a foreign name, but each error became fuel for her resolve. Behind closed doors, she remained the same, Clara who once washed dishes until her hands ached. She whispered to herself at night, promising that she would not be swallowed by this world. Yet when she looked into the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection. A polished stranger stared back, draped in diamonds and expectation. And still, there were moments she could not explain, moments when she caught her husband watching her, his eyes unreadable. He said little, offering only curt nods or cool instructions. But once, after she had spoken confidently to a hostile shareholder, she saw something different. Not amusement, not calculation. Respect, perhaps. It vanished as quickly as it came. The game continued. The contract dictated appearances, and appearances she gave. But with each event, each whispered challenge, Clara's resolve hardened. If they wanted her to play the role of the millionaire's wife, she would play it. But she would play it her way. Because this was no longer just survival. It was a battle for dignity, for self, for the right to stand without bowing. And though the mansion's walls loomed high and unyielding, Clara knew she carried something within them could not touch, a spark that no contract could erase. The world might see a woman polished into perfection at his side, but deep inside, she remained the girl who had faced down hunger, debt, and despair. And she was not afraid to face this, too. The invitation had arrived on thick ivory paper, sealed with gold. A gala in honor of a global charity initiative, attended by the most powerful figures in the city. For Clara, it would be the first true test of her place at his side. The night of the event, she stood in the mansion's foyer as a chauffeur waited outside with the car. Her gown shimmered pale silver, a choice the stylist assured would photograph well. Her husband appeared moments later, dressed in a suit as dark as midnight. He gave her a quick glance, unreadable, before offering his arm. The ride into the city was silent. Clara stared out the window, watching streetlights flicker past, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When they arrived, cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd surged, reporters calling out questions as they walked the red carpet. "Mr. Hale, is this your new bride?" one shouted. Clara froze for a heartbeat. The microphones leaned in, the flashes blinding. She could feel sweat prick her palms, but then she remembered the contract's demand. Appearances must be flawless. She drew in a breath, lifted her chin, and smiled. "Yes," she said clearly, "and I am honored to stand by his side tonight." The cameras exploded with light. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. She did not falter again. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and black tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers rained light across marble floors. Music drifted from a string quartet in the corner, soft but commanding. Waiters carried silver trays heavy with champagne. At first, the evening went smoothly. She nodded politely to introductions, held her posture as rehearsed, and followed her husband's lead. But as they moved through the crowd, a woman in a scarlet gown intercepted them. Tall, elegant. Her smile carried a sharp edge. "So this is the wife," the woman said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Forgive me, I did not realize you married so quickly. Tell me, dear, how does it feel to step into a world you clearly know nothing about?" A circle of guests gathered, eager for spectacle. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She glanced at her husband, but his expression was carved from stone. He was not going to save her. This was her battle. For a moment, panic threatened to consume her. Then she remembered the words she had whispered to herself at night. "Do not let them break you." She steadied her breath, looked the woman in the eye, and spoke. "You are right," Clara said softly, but her voice carried. "I do not know everything about this world, but what I do know is that respect is not measured in gowns or titles. It is measured in how we treat others, even those we believe beneath us." The air shifted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The woman's smile faltered, her cheeks coloring. Clara did not look away. She held her ground, her spine straight, her voice calm. "And besides," she added, her lips curving just slightly, "it is better to learn than to pretend." A few guests chuckled quietly. Others nodded in approval. The woman in scarlet stepped back, flustered, and quickly excused herself. Clara exhaled, her heart hammering in her chest. She expected her husband to scold her later, to remind her that confrontation was dangerous. Instead, when she glanced at him, she caught something startling pride. His eyes held hers for a fleeting second, a spark of acknowledgement before his mask returned. The evening continued, but the air around Clara felt lighter. For the first time, she realized she could stand in this world without collapsing. The whispers that followed her now were not filled with scorn, but with curiosity, even admiration. When they finally left the gala, the cameras once again exploded in light. Reporters called after them, eager to capture the image of the humble millionaire and his new wife. Clara lifted her chin higher this time, her smile no longer forced. As the car pulled away, silence settled again. She braced for his judgment, her pulse quickening, but instead, he said only one thing. "You surprised me tonight." Clara turned toward him, uncertain if it was praise or warning. He gave no further explanation. His gaze returned to the window, the city lights reflected in his eyes. But Clara knew what she had done. For once, the story was not about debts or contracts or survival. It was about her. And in that ballroom, under the weight of every judgmental stare, she had not broken. She had risen. The drive back from the gala was cloaked in silence, but not the heavy silence that had once pressed down on Clara. This one carried something different, charged, as if unspoken words lingered between them. When the car finally pulled into the long driveway of the mansion, Clara let out the breath she had been holding. Inside, the mansion was dim, its grand chandeliers extinguished, leaving only a few lamps glowing in the hall. Clara gathered the hem of her gown and followed him through the marble corridors. She expected him to retreat into his study, as he always did. Instead, he paused at the base of the staircase. "Come," he said. It was not a command, not exactly, but his tone left little room for refusal. He led her up the stairs and out onto a terrace that overlooked the sprawling gardens. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of roses drifting from the grounds below. The city lights shimmered far in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond their gilded cage. For a long while, neither spoke. He stood at the railing, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Clara stayed a step behind, uncertain why he had brought her here. Finally, he broke the silence. "You handled yourself tonight." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "You mean at the gala?" "Yes." His voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. "Most would have crumbled under that kind of scrutiny. But you did not." She searched his profile, trying to read him. "You sound surprised." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I am. I expected you to be like your sister, fragile, unwilling to face the fire. But you stood in it." The admission unsettled her. He rarely spoke more than necessary, and never with such candor. "Why do you keep comparing me to her?" she asked. His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he would shut down again. But then he said, "Because she ran. She feared the weight of this life. You stayed." Clara's heart thudded. She wanted to tell him she had not stayed by choice, that she had been trapped by circumstance. Yet the truth was complicated. She had stayed, and she had survived. The silence stretched again, but it felt different now, less hostile. Then, to her surprise, he spoke again, softer this time. "Do you know why I cannot sleep?" The question startled her. "What?" He turned, and for the first time she saw something break in his eyes. Not steel, not calculation, something raw. "At night, when the house is quiet, I hear echoes. Deals gone wrong. Betrayals I did not see coming. Faces of men I trusted who stabbed me in the back. Every choice I made brought me here, surrounded by wealth and power, but it also left me alone." Clara's throat tightened. She had not expected this, not from him. She saw it now, the crack in the mask he wore so tightly. Beneath the polished image of a humble millionaire was a man scarred by betrayal, haunted by solitude. Without thinking, she stepped closer, offering the only thing she could. She took the folded handkerchief from her clutch and placed it on the railing beside him. "You do not have to explain it to me," she said softly. "But you are not the only one who knows what it is like to feel alone. For a moment, he did not move. Then, slowly, he reached for the handkerchief. His fingers brushed hers just barely, but enough to send a spark through the night air. He did not thank her. He did not smile. But something had shifted. The wall between them, built high and fortified with contracts and silence, had begun to crack. They stood side by side in the stillness, two souls bound by circumstance, staring out at a world that did not know their secrets. And in that fragile moment, Clara realized that the man everyone believed to be invincible was, in truth, just a man, brilliant, broken, and perhaps more dangerous for it. The fragile silence of the terrace did not last. Just days later, Clara found herself standing in the center of another storm. The morning began with the arrival of a letter, hand-delivered, sealed with a crest she did not recognize. Her husband read it first, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the page. Without a word, he folded it and slipped it into his pocket. But Clara saw the flicker of tension in his jaw, and she knew something was coming. That evening, they attended a shareholders' dinner at a glass-walled hotel that overlooked the city skyline. The air was charged, every table buzzing with conversations about profits and mergers. Clara did her best to play her role, poised at his side, smiling when addressed. But the calm shattered when a familiar figure appeared, her sister. Clara's breath caught. She had not seen her since the night before the wedding, since the plea that had dragged Clara into this life. Now her sister stood at the edge of the room, pale but composed, eyes darting between Clara and the man she now called her husband. The whispers began immediately. Guests leaned toward one another, speculation curling like smoke through the crowd. Clara felt the heat of their stares, the weight of their judgment. Her sister's voice carried across the table. "Tell me, Clara," she said sweetly, but her tone was a blade. "Do they know you are here in my place? Do they know this marriage is nothing but a lie?" The room froze. Every eye locked on Clara. The music faltered, a single violin string screeching before silence swallowed the hall. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. She searched her husband's face, but he remained still, unreadable. He was testing her. He would not intervene. Her sister stepped closer, her smile twisting. "How long do you think you can fool them? How long before they see that you are nothing but a stand-in, a poor girl in borrowed silk?" The words cut deep, reopening every wound Clara had tried to bury. She felt the sting of humiliation, the urge to run. But then she remembered the terrace, the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, the truth that even the mighty could break. And she remembered her vow to herself. She would not bow. Clara rose slowly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. Her voice, though soft, carried through the hall. "You are right. I was not meant to stand here. I did not plan for any of this. But I am here, and I will not apologize for surviving." Gasps rippled through the room. Her sister's face hardened, but Clara pressed on. "You call this a lie? Perhaps. But sometimes a lie becomes truth when you choose to live it. And I choose to stand here, no matter what you think of me." The room erupted in murmurs. Some looked scandalized, others impressed. Clara's heart pounded, but she did not look away. She had faced her sister's blade and answered with steel of her own. Her husband finally stood, his expression calm but his voice edged with command. "Enough. This conversation ends here." He placed a hand at the small of Clara's back, guiding her from the room. But as they stepped into the corridor, Clara caught the shadow of something darker in his eyes. Not anger, not pride, something else. The dark bargain he had warned her never to question was beginning to surface. The corridor outside the banquet hall was dim, lined with tall mirrors that reflected Clara's pale face back at her. Her husband walked beside her, his hand steady at her back, but the silence between them was heavy, suffocating. When they reached the elevator, Clara stopped abruptly. She turned to him, her voice breaking the stillness. "No more games. What is this bargain you are hiding from me?" He looked at her with that same unreadable calm, the mask he wore so well. "You are tired. Tonight was difficult. Rest. And tomorrow we—" "No," Clara cut in sharply, her eyes blazing. "Do not dismiss me. Do not treat me like another contract to be managed. My sister tried to expose us, and she nearly succeeded. If you truly want this arrangement to survive, then you owe me the truth." The mask cracked just slightly. His jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with something darker. You think you want the truth, Clara, but you do not. It will burn everything you thought you knew. Then let it burn, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I would rather face the fire than live in your shadows. The elevator doors slid open, but neither moved. The air between them was charged, two wills colliding in silence. Finally, he stepped closer, his presence towering, but his voice was low, almost raw. There was a deal, he admitted, a deal that secured this empire. Partnerships sealed with loyalty, but loyalty bought with blood. Your sister, she was meant to shield me, to play the part you now play, but she could not bear the weight of it, so you stand in her place. Clara's chest tightened. And you call that humility. You let the world believe you are a man of grace, of simplicity, when in truth you are bound by corruption. He did not deny it. His silence was louder than words. Clara's eyes filled with unshed tears, but she did not look away. Then hear me now. I will not be complicit in your secrets. If you want me to stay, you will choose between the power you cling to and the truth you fear. For the first time, he faltered. The weight of her words seemed to land on him like a blow. His hand dropped from her back, falling to his side. The elevator chimed softly, the doors threatening to close, but Clara's gaze held his. Decide, she whispered, because if you do not, I will. The doors slid shut, leaving the tension unresolved, the choice hanging between them like a blade. The following days moved like storms through the mansion. Meetings were canceled, phone calls unanswered. Clara kept her distance, but she felt the tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were waiting for his decision. On the third evening, he summoned her to the ballroom, a vast space usually reserved for charity galas. Tonight it was empty, save for a single table at the center. Upon it lay the contract she had signed weeks ago. He stood beside it, his expression grave. You asked me to choose, he said, and I have. Clara's pulse quickened as she stepped closer. He picked up the folder, tore the pages down the middle, and let the pieces fall to the marble floor. The sound echoed like a verdict. No more contracts, no more bargains. If you stay, it will be because you want to, not because you are bound. Her throat tightened. And your empire? What of the men who would destroy you without those bargains? His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. Then let them come. I would rather fight with clean hands than live chained by corruption. Clara felt the weight lift from her chest. A breath she had not known she was holding finally released. She stepped forward, her voice soft but unwavering. You are not the only one who has fought to survive. If you will stand in truth, then so will I. But this time, not as a contract, as your partner. For a moment, the silence stretched. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and drew out a simple velvet box. Inside lay a ring, not the symbol of a bargain, but of a vow freely given. I am asking you, Clara, he said, his voice raw with sincerity. Not as part of an arrangement, not as payment for your sacrifice. I am asking you to be my wife, truly. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, yes. The marble hall no longer felt cold. It felt like a new beginning. Months later, the world no longer whispered of contracts or scandals. Instead, it witnessed a wedding not forged by desperation, but by choice. No grand spectacle, only a gathering of those who mattered. When Clara walked down the aisle this time, she carried no fear, no borrowed vows. She carried her own. And as he took her hand, the man once hidden behind the mask of humility looked at her not as a transaction, but as the woman who had given him something no bargain ever could love born of truth.